Welcome to Raising Empowered Kids interview series. I'm here with Destin Gerek, who is a transformational empowerment coach who specializes in helping men tap into their masculine core, awaken their sexual energy, and harness this newfound power to passionately manifest their biggest visions and create the life of their dreams. Referred to by the press as Tantra meets Tony Robbins, Destin Gerek is an internationally recognized leading voice in masculinity, sexuality, consciousness, and personal empowerment. Recognizing the need for new role models for men in these changing times, Destin is dedicated to redefining masculinity for the 21st century. The greatest power of Destin's transformational work is that he embodies it. Destin has taken all that he's learned, studied, and explored and integrated it fully into his being, such that he really walks his talk. All avenues are spoken for. Destin has reached people with his message on at least 6 continents, empowering individuals, couples, and groups worldwide. Thank you, Destin, for being with us today. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, I've been following your work for a while, and I really love, that your mission. You're out there empowering men. Your business is, evolving the evolved masculine. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in working with men?
Uh, there's not really a short version to that, but I'll do my best. I'm just going to run through some things pretty quickly. When I was in high school, my high school sweetheart was raped on her 15th birthday, uh, just before we met. And I ended up being the first person that she told. And it had a huge impact on me as I wasn't emotionally equipped to handle it. We ended up in a multi-year relationship. Um, its impact was ever present.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, in a place of exasperation, I made a declaration that I was going to do everything that I could with my life to create a world where things like this didn't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, in many ways, that's the root. Uh, I spent much of the next 10 years focusing more on women and on helping them heal from trauma, helping them build trust with men and the masculine again. And then finally, I hit a point of realizing, probably when I was about 28, 29 years old, that something had gotten really out of balance in myself. That through all this work with women, hearing all the things that I'd heard, I had come to take on a story and a message that, in many ways, is even more amplified in our society today. That masculinity, that there's something inherently harmful about masculinity and being a man. And now, being a man and taking in that message had some really strong impacts on me. That over time, I started disconnecting more and more to those parts of myself, retreating more and more into my feminine because it felt safer,
Mm-hmm.
and um, starting to have more and more women in my life and less men in my life. Finally, just before I was 30 years old, I realized something's really off kilter here and I need to do something about it. And I decided that I was going to take 2007 to be the year that I actively explored my masculinity and what it means to me to be a man in the world. That proved to be enormously powerful, far more so than I ever expected it to be, so much so that it ended up becoming the foundation of my work.
Mm-hmm.
As I came to recognize that what I thought was just my weird story and journey is actually fairly epidemic in with my generation and younger, that there's quite a few men who are struggling with what does it mean to be a man. And with this past year, with the spark of the Me Too movement and Time's Up movements, I think we have more men than ever who are introspecting and trying to look at themselves about, how am I showing up as a man? What does it mean to be a man? How do I do this better? How do I relate to sex? How do I relate to women? And maybe some of the ways in which I was taught about these things isn't actually very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so my work is really designed to hit those three major points: how men relate to themselves as men, their masculinity, how they connect to their sexuality, how they connect to women and the feminine, both in women as well as their inner feminine, and how to form healthy relationships with those.
Hmm. Yeah, well, thank you for doing the work that you're doing because it's so needed. And I know for me personally, I'm single, I'm dating, this kind of thing. And I find myself just really like looking for something more from the men that I come into contact with. And I don't know how to explain it. I don't know, like, I can't really verbalize it. And so maybe, with the work that you're doing, you can help us get the words and the language and that kind of thing. Because I think, in this day and age, we really are looking for more in our relationships, looking for a deeper connection. Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I feel that I like the way that you phrased it, that there are a lot of women who know that they're looking for more, but don't necessarily know how to put it into words. Um, but I also believe that there are a lot of men and more men who are recognizing that the way, that there's got to be something more, or that something's not working, but they don't necessarily know where to go.
Right.
They don't necessarily know what what else it could look like.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
it's my hope and belief that where we are with the cultural moment that we're having right now, and over the past year, particularly post me, the start of the Me Too movement, is that it's forcing us as men to, like, it's become uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and there's beauty in discomfort, because discomfort usually precedes change. And
Yeah.
when it's uncomfortable enough, we're more likely to do the work that's required for real change to take place. And almost invariably, if we do that work, on the other side, we're far better off for it as a result.
Absolutely. So can you like articulate for us like what are the pieces of masculinity that, as it is in our culture today that are might be considered toxic or that we could do better or, could be done differently?
Yeah. In all honesty, you use the phrase because it's become a big thing over the past couple of years, particularly around toxic masculinity. And I've got mixed feelings about the phrase. I
It's
do.
kind of loaded.
It's very loaded, and it is misused by uh, men who, some of whom kind of intentionally misunderstand it, but it's also misused by some women um, who weaponize it,
Mhm.
who use it as a tool for power, and to take away power, and to hurt. And I'm not convinced that that's super helpful, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I'm also a big believer that if you're going to speak about toxic masculinity, it is extremely important that you give at least equal time, if not more time, to what healthy masculinity, what I call evolved masculine or masculinity would look like. Like our sense of masculinity evolved, having grown through everything that we've been up to this point, letting go of that which no longer serves the organism anymore, and taking on and growing into more of the things that actually do really serve and are being called for. A, that is an adaptation to fit with the needs of today.
Mhm.
Um, so old paradigm, toxic masculinity. I mean, this tends to be rooted. Well, honestly, if I were to speak of the single biggest toxic component, that's, as I see it, it's a devaluing of the feminine,
Mhm.
and it is toxic for everybody.
Yeah.
It's toxic for women because they feel that there's a core aspect of their essence and who they are that is not valued,
Mhm.
is not seen, is not appreciated, and is certainly not held as equal. But it's also very toxic for the man, because the feminine, through the lens that I look at the things, I'm impacted a lot by tantric philosophy and lineage, and its descriptions of masculine and feminine as energies that permeate the universe, and how in each one of us exists we can tap into any of those energies. And yes, most men have this uh, core essence that is primarily a masculine essence, and well, most women carry a core essence that's primarily a feminine essence, and we still have access to it all. Okay,
Mhm.
so within men the feminine that exists within us is that which allows us to feel, quite frankly. Allows us to feel our emotions, not just our anger, but the wide range of emotions, uh, sadness, uh, love, laughter, happiness, joy.
Mhm.
It's amazing that amongst amongst men, showing too much joy or laughter can be suspect,
Yeah, that's how sad.
toxic. So, so those feeling qualities that can rob us from an opportunity to really experience what this life has to offer. And of course, there's much more, but we have limited time here. Otherwise, in regards to toxic components, there's the so aside from the lack of feeling, except for anger, quite often, uh, there's the need to control, to dominate, to prove, to compete, to the sense of one's power as a power over others, as opposed to the source of your power as being sourced from deep within. In which case, this is the type of power that I work with men around to cultivate that power. That's really about that light that exists within you, shining it as brightly as possible. The
Mhm.
potential that exists within you, allowing it to come into the fullness of what it's capable of. But that's an inner game. That has nothing to do with where other people are in relation to you.
Right.
And that type of power inspires the power to arise in others. That makes sense. So there's just a few of those differences that's
Mhm.
really harm women and harm men.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And so when you're working with men and stuff, you're cultivating this new, this newer vision. Can you talk some about that and like kind of give us a vision of how you envision this healthier version of masculinity?
Ready? I've done this one before. The evolved masculine is grounded. He's solid in himself and who he is. He knows his principles and values and what he's a stand for. He's willing to fight for those values and principles if necessary, and hell, if necessary, he'd be willing to die for them. He's connected to himself as a primal being, those animalistic aspects of who we are, the human animal, the connection to the earth and the potent energies that exist from that primal nature. He owns and claims the fullness of his sexuality, his desires, his fantasies, without fear, shame, guilt, he's or distortions. He claims his power, the power that we spoke of earlier, the power that is sourced from within. He's not afraid of that power, nor does he need to put something on to be in that power. It simply is part of him.
Mhm.
He's opened his heart. He can love. He can love others. He can allow love in. He loves fully, freely, fiercely. He's self expressed, communicates, authentic, knows his truth, is able to uh, be aware of and communicate and maintain his desires, his fears, his boundaries. He's cultivated a sharp intellect as well as a capacity to still and quiet his mind. And from that, allow the intuition or that gut sense and feeling to be felt and to trust in that sense. And he has a connection to a spirituality. This is not about being married to some other dogma from the past. It is uniquely his and his own. It is the relationship between him and God, source, the universe, however he calls it, is a connection and a path that he can cultivate through his life. And the evolved masculine has integrated his healthy feminine. He knows her within, and through that knowing of her, the comfort with her, the ease with her, allows him to know and understand and connect to her externally. And with that, form those healthier, solid, connected, and loving relationships that ultimately he desires.
It's beautiful. Thank you for putting the time and energy to put that into words.
So, so
For
I've
all
I've
of us.
explained this. I've explained it in different ways, and then later on, I want to offer a free gift to your listeners that actually goes into that clear and a little bit more in depth. I call it the Evolved Masculine Blueprint. And
Okay.
I find that it's very useful to have the type of a blueprint that's kind of like has these delineated points, these focal points that there may be certain aspects of that your male, particularly male listeners, might have heard and resonate more with. There might have been parts that are a little bit less. There might have been parts that's like, ooh, like I want more of that, or other words like, yeah, I'm really good at that part. But if you bring your attention to actively cultivate any or each of these qualities, you put your attention there, they will grow. And you're hard pressed. I think a person would be hard pressed to really look at or listen to those qualities that I spoke of and be like, no, I don't like that. Um, these are values and principles that have stood the test of time ultimately. Give them attention and they will grow and your life will be better for it.
Absolutely. So for parents who want to raise sons,
Mm-hmm.
who raise children who, embody these qualities,
Yeah.
so it sounds like putting attention to like these points or these qualities could maybe help guide us in that direction.
Yeah. I think one of the core pieces it has to do with just clarifying like what your values and principles are.
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Yeah,
need to look
definitely.
exactly like mine. In fact, they're most likely not going to. But simply getting clear as to what is important to you, what values are so important to you that you'll place front and center to live by, to make them paramount, that to guide your choices as you walk through life, and to raise your children with um, you can raise your children with those values and also recognize that sooner or later they're gonna have to determine their own principles and values.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's one of the tricks of parenting, right? Is finding that right line between that desire to help guide or even mold our children and that point of hands off, allowing and seeing who is this person who I am in uh, who I am taking care of,
Yeah.
shepherding as he or she comes into full being.
Yes. Yes, that's the trick. It's an amazing adventure to watch them unfold into, who they are and to nurture that along the way.
My wife and I just had a baby 9 months ago, baby girl, and so I'm at the very beginnings of that journey, and yeah, I'm still so aware of that, seeing those places of like, okay, like there's permissiveness and then there's boundaries,
Yes.
and uh, like being a parent is one big experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's like, okay, I think we need a little bit more boundary there. Maybe that was a little too much, a little bit more permissiveness there. And I expect
Yeah,
that will only be challenged more as she gets older.
absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of our role models too for parenting, they followed the authoritarian, parenting models and that kind of thing. So not everybody's parents did, but a lot of ours did. And those models are kind of outdated now. They don't really reflect our values as a society anymore. And so yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting journey to try to navigate these waters and figure out, how to do it in a way that you're not shaming or threatening and, your child to get
Yeah,
it to
and at the
cooperate.
same time, boundaries are really helpful to a child.
Absolutely essential.
And And particularly at a certain point, they're going to be testing those boundaries more and more. And they're testing them because they want to find them ultimately.
Mhm.
And if we don't put them there, they're more likely to just keep pushing and pushing and or acting out until find out, okay, where is it? Where is it? Where are the bounds? No,
Right,
not yet. Okay, more.
right, right. Mhm. Absolutely. So, what would you suggest to parents? I mean, I know that that you're working with adult men,
Mhm.
and but do you have thoughts that you would share with parents, like as a result of certain things that have happened to these men, as they've grown up and that type of stuff? I'm sure that you've had thoughts, and
Yeah,
as,
there are a couple of things that come to my mind right away. Um, so I run an online membership community with the Evolved Masculine, and one of the things that we hold within this community is that this is a this is a space in the community where we where all of you is welcome, where your your places of vulnerability and weakness are welcomed, and we will call you into your deepest strength. And both of these are important.
Mhm.
And I think this is very much the case when it comes to raising boys as well, is that um, off, oftentimes parents can be focused on one or the other. Either, particularly those with more traditional ways of doing things and ideas around masculinity, can hold this idea of a particular type of strength and power that they want their boy to be or become, and will not,
Mhm.
will push him constantly towards that,
Right,
but he doesn't end up feeling like there's a space for his tears, his pain, his suffering, his weakness, his sadness, any of that.
right.
Or there are parents who kind of rebel against that, and they want to make sure that their son can cry, can go into the can be sensitive, can do all those things, but he ends up instead lacking being challenged to come into his fullest strength.
Mhm.
And so, can you hold your son in both? That's my first piece.
Okay. And what might that look like?
Um, well, one, let's start on the vulnerability side. Yeah, making sure that he's not shamed or made wrong for the expression of his vulnerabilities, whether pain or sadness, or tears.
Mhm.
Um, and where are the places and how are the places that he can be uh, challenged to rise up, whether it's physical,
Mhm.
through sport or through other means that challenge him or his body or his being, physically, whether it's intellectually, finding where are his edges and teaching him within the values of leaning into those edges.
Mhm.
I think that this is useful for everyone, men and women, but we'll speak particularly to boys and men, that there's something very important and very powerful for us to spend the majority of our time leaning into the edges of our capacity. That uh, it can be it can be easy to get complacent or to just be where this is where I'm comfortable, but find where those edges are, what will push you, what feels difficult, um, what will stretch you without breaking you.
Mhm.
And by doing so, you'll stretch. By doing so, you'll stretch. By doing so, you'll stretch. And through this, his capacity will grow and grow and grow. No matter what area we're talking about, physically, intellectually, spiritually, emotionally, um, getting him outside of his comfort zone, doing a bit more than maybe he thought he would have been able to do,
Mhm.
and discovering along the way that he's capable.
Mhm.
By doing so, this can also help him develop a strong sense of self confidence. And
Yes,
that self confidence will carry him through his life.
absolutely. Mhm. And the girls, the same thing too. I mean, all that you've said applies to girls too. Get outside the comfort zone, stretch those boundaries a little bit. Yeah, definitely.
So the other area that I'll speak to, which I want to speak to in part because I don't know all your guests, and I don't know if anybody else is going there. And that's how do we raise boys to be sexually healthy men?
Mhm.
Again, particularly important right now in that there's increased awareness that maybe there's a lot more that's needed to be done there.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and so part of it is what's being spoken of a lot right now around consent
Mhm.
and him uh, mm, respecting her yeses and her nos. Um, yes, let's just first let that land. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
um, this starts as learning about bodily autonomy, and that begins with his own.
Right.
And if he is learning that if you are bigger than and stronger than somebody else, I mean, then you can make them do what you want them to do
Mhm.
um, to his own self, then that is the message that he is getting. And sooner or later, he'll be the bigger and stronger one.
Right. Mhm.
But additionally, if we really want to create that shift, this requires for him to be able to listen and understand subtleties.
Mhm.
The communications that women are communicating, sexually and not, part of it is with their words, and a lot of it is not.
Right. Mhm.
And a lot of men, the not the not clear verbal yes or no completely flies over his head.
Right. Mhm.
But we can change that. Um, and I think that part of that has to do with the ways in which I spoke of earlier, that as boys and as men, we're often taught to not feel. And it is a big part of what divorces us from being able to tell what is going on in our body, which makes it very difficult for us to tell what's going on in your body.
Right. Mhm.
And so, if we're really going to understand, to be able to read your nonverbal cues, to be able to sense when you're relaxed and open to us versus when you're contracting in some way, uh, um, we need to be able to, it needs to start here. And then also to bring that attention into reading those things and sensing those things in somebody else.
Mhm.
This is something that's been an issue for a long time, we'll say.
Yeah.
But today we're dealing with it in a new way.
Mhm.
We're dealing with it in a new way because of technology
Mhm.
and the sheer amount of time that people, and especially boys, are spending in front of screens and
Mhm.
video games and porn.
Yes.
Um, all go together in that we're spending less time in flesh and blood human interaction, which is the primary place where we would be building those skills of empathy,
Right.
build building those skills of being able to sense into somebody else and what it is that they're wanting or needing or feeling. So there's an added challenge there that I don't claim to, I don't claim to have the answer to at this time, other than making sure that they get more uh, non-screen time, uh,
Mhm.
with people time. How can you intentionally help your child pick up on? Maybe it's even just bringing their awareness to the fact that this is a thing.
Right.
It's something that a lot of people don't ever talk about. It's just something we're supposed to just naturally pick up on. And
Mhm.
many do, and some don't.
Right.
And some really don't.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. And the whole piece about the sexually healthy men, I think, is really important. And the porn piece, comes in. Like, I mean, kids are seeing porn as young as like 7 years old. By the time they're 10, 12, they've definitely seen it. And
It
it's
might be
not
more
real.
than seeing it. It might be hours and hours and hours of seeing it.
Yeah, really, really frightening. I don't know if you've ever seen the website. Oh my God, yes, OMG,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, I have.
I think they're just their work is just amazing. And I was, found myself wondering, it's like, because kids are curious. We know they're curious. That's why they're Googling sex, that's why they're looking at porn. And what if, like boys, in particular, were given access to something like that, that's, showing, you know, like candid conversations with women about like what they want, what's pleasurable. And I mean, it's got all the graphic stuff that they're looking for in the porn and that kind of thing. And, but yet it's educational and tastefully done. And, like what if there was more stuff like that out there for, the teenagers, as they're coming up and wanting that information?
Totally. Totally. It's huge. It's necessary. And as were pointing to, kids are seeing porn. Period. Um, there was a study done a few years ago in college. I think this was in Canada, in a college campus, where they wanted to study something about the effects of porn, and for their control group, um, they were uh, putting calls out for any for college age uh, men who had not watched any porn. They had they ne- they weren't able to conduct the study because they couldn't find anybody for the control group.
Yeah, I heard that.
No one. That's insane
Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
totally understandable at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. And yeah.
So the one of the big challenges with it is that isn't it's that how much of this very particular um, types of depictions of sex that kids are taking in, and how much of it before they ever have sex for the first time. So before they can ever have their authentic like self-discovery, they're being bombarded with programming around this is what sex is,
Hmm.
and it's a particular model. And while on one hand, you can find so many different kinds of sex, um, at the same time, it it actually is a rather narrow. The vast majority of anyway is a rather narrow flavor of what sex is, what it means, how it's supposed to go,
Hmm.
and it's not a model that works for most women. And quite frankly, after working with so many men over so long, it doesn't really work for most men long term either.
Hmm.
Short term sometimes, but over time it tends to cause issues.
Yeah.
And then we have epidemics of sexless marriages in this country. Um, yeah, well, I have no, as well as non-orgasmic women, meaning women who never or rarely have orgasms. Yeah, quite honestly, I think that both are tied to the fact that men, particularly, uh, have been trained a particular way around what sex is and how it's supposed to be that doesn't really work for most women.
Hmm.
Um, but some women are more adaptable than others.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
when you get to the end, you're more of a woman than I am. Uh, when you get to the core of most women's authentic sexual desires, it rarely looks like anything you see in porn.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not something that young men are. That's not the message that they're receiving. They're watching these things and they're seeing these sexy young women who are at least seeming to have these screaming orgasms at from these very particular ways of doing things, and then wondering, wait, why is that not happening when I'm trying to have sex with this young woman?
Right.
Um, but either my dick must not be big enough. Oh, sorry, I don't know what I'm supposed to say.
No, language
might,
is fine.
might not be big
I'm
enough,
not censoring anybody.
or
That's
it's because I can't last for hours like the porn star guy, or because you know what, I just need to pound harder and faster. That will do it.
right.
And yeah, none of these things are particularly helpful. In fact, they can be quite harmful and certainly can interfere with that authentic, intimate, and really passionate sexual experience that would be more fulfilling for both of them.
Hmm. So do you have thoughts about um, like, what do I want to say? I want to say, like, for parents who are talking to their teenage sons about sex, like, what would you want, like, what messages would you want boys to receive?
Yeah. Well, it's tricky because on one hand, um, you don't want to convey shame,
Yep.
and that can be easy. I realized even after I finished right there that um, I I want to state that I did not mean to convey any sense of shame around watching or use of porn. I've viewed quite a bit of porn in my life. Um, Thankfully, I've had it's a portion of a much larger palette of experiences and things that, yeah, I've been a part of.
Hmm.
Um, uh, so being as careful as you can to not transmit your own crap around sex or porn um, onto your children, while at the same time um, helping them understand that there are, if you can find better models, whether you're comfortable sharing OMGS with your kids or other types of models that you feel would be more of a in line with the type of sexuality you believe is healthier and you would like for them to at least know exists. Open I would say that the most important thing though is to do everything you can to have open lines of communication. And this is where the being careful around judgmental or shaming type of language, because if you're a teenager especially gets even a tiniest sense of judgment from you,
Hmm.
done. That's it. Good luck ever getting them to open up about this or anything else again.
Hmm.
um, so validation, non-judgment, support, uh, and this one of the problems is that even the way we tend to speak about this as a society of um, like when do you have that sex talk with your kids?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's the wrong way of going about it, quite frankly. Um, this is in an ideal world and what we're aiming towards. So I'll tell you in 20 years how this has worked out.
Hmm.
Uh, it is that it's ever present from birth. In
Hmm.
fact, in utero. And I say that not to, I mean, it sounds funny, but I say to be able to speak about these things even when it's in the baby's belly, not for the baby, and not when it's not when the child is pre-verbal. It's not for the kid. It's for you.
Hmm.
It's so that you normalize it. So that
Yes.
you normalize speaking about these things, so that you can be comfortable and free in speaking about these things, and then don't stop. Then it's not a singular big event. Sexuality is part of human life,
And it so is. Hmm.
and being able to speak about it with some regularity and as freely as talking about any other aspect of life, that would do wonders towards raising sexually healthy teenagers and beyond.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so true. I mean, we can start when they're babies, like, starts with like the names of the body parts and, doing the boundaries, the consent, it's like a layer of onion, it's like you can start when they're babies and they're pulling their little brother or sister's hair, and just go from there. So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, particularly if the parents are together, it's I understand that different people have different values, so I'm just going to speak of mine freely and do what you want with this. That that I really believe in being affectionate with my wife in front of our children.
Mhm.
Not just that it's okay, but that it's good for them. That I want my children to become sexually healthy adults, and for that, having a healthy sexual expression in the household models that this is not something that we should be ashamed of or need to completely hide away. Now I'm not now I'm not pulling the high chair into the room as as mama and I are making love together. um it's not like, pull out your popcorn, but we're very physically affectionate with one another. We kiss in front of the child all the time. We have a playful, light sexual energy between us that we allow to permeate through our days. Not just there is no sexuality and then you close the door, dim the lights, and it's on.
right.
um, that type of compartmentalization I don't really see as super healthy. And so how do we, if we want to change it for our children, it helps with starting to work on it within ourselves and modeling what we can.
Yeah, that's true. And I think as, tribal culture, evolving through the ages, we were in our tribal, cave, hut, whatever it happened to be, and people are making love and making babies right there in front of everybody else.
Yeah.
So I was curious about Tantra. I know some of our people aren't going to be familiar with that terminology. Could you like tell us a little bit about that and um, how that
Sure.
plays into like a healthy version of sexuality?
Yeah, it's a bit of a loaded term at this point. That the way that most Americans think of tantra, if they think of it at all, is sex. And tantra, at its core, is a spiritual philosophy, birthplace in India, more than 5,000 years old.
Mhm.
And when it feels very distinct to most Americans and Judeo-Christian mindset because sexuality is very integrated into the spirituality, is a part of the spirituality, and one of the doorways to explore spirituality. Um, that is so foreign to most Judeo-Christian minded folks that I think that we grabbed onto the sexuality part of the spirituality, and that's the part that's um, I mean, most things that you could find on tantra in the U.S. have to do with tantric sex.
Yes. Mhm.
Um, so I have dived rather deeply into tantric sexuality, as well as the larger spirituality, and Tantra teaches to slow down. Uh, most folks tend to be goal oriented.
Mhm.
Um, you know, sex is about driving towards the orgasm.
Right.
At least one of yours, if you're lucky, both. But regardless, you're driving towards the orgasm.
Right.
Tantra is not about the orgasm. It is about it's about this moment and this moment. Each take looking at each moment as an opportunity to deepen intimacy, connection, passion, pleasure. How much can you feel and experience moment to moment. Now, when you shift that orientation from a intentional trajectory towards something to a relaxing into this moment, um, one, sex tends to last longer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, there's a different type of pleasure that can be experienced. It's a little bit hard to put words on, but without the reaching towards orgasm, there's something that can relax. Particularly, well, it's a little bit different in men's and women's bodies. Women have a tendency to often feel like they have to, chase and reach towards their orgasm. Well, men can often feel like they're constantly like trying to like fight back their orgasm
Mm-hmm.
to hold it off. But there is a place through tantric methods, amongst other things, where you can learn to circulate and move that sexual energy that generates in your groin and move it more freely through your body. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're able to do that more freely, there's something that can just and you can relax into pleasure instead of tightening in the face of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
You can uh, feel more pleasure, and when you do have orgasms, they're more full body versus just genitally based.
Right.
Men can even learn to have non-ejaculatory energetic orgasms, something that our larger society doesn't recognize as possible,
Right.
and multiple orgasms. Again, what?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I teach about these things in what I call sexual self mastery. Um, Honestly, while some of the men come in because they're specifically wanting to learn to be multi-orgasmic, most come into that training because they just want to learn to be able to last longer, or better yet, last as long as I want.
Yeah.
Sign me up. And as incredible as that is, as that's really just a doorway into this whole host of other possibilities that are only possible once there is that relaxation around one's own ejaculatory reflex and orgasm. So there's a lot that could be said, but there's a few things.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you. I
Yeah.
think that's a nice synopsis for people who are curious or don't know anything about it, I think.
Yeah. So I do my best within these things to I've dived very deep into these esoteric, kind of out there, even woo-woo areas. And with my work particularly, I put a lot of energy into how to ground it out, how to make it more tangible. How can we kind of like um, get rid of the fluff and uh, if I want you to take something on, I don't want you to just believe it because I say so. I'm going to give you a practice that you can test
Mm-hmm.
how it works in your body. Try it on. Then if you're getting results, you're going to want to do more of it, and then
Absolutely.
you can work with another tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And is there anything else that we haven't talked about or that you would like to share with parents while you've got a room full of them here?
Yeah, I'm going to say this, that depending on the circles that you swim in, there can be, it can seem like there is a rising distrust of men and masculinity right now. And as we speak about things like the future is female and girl power and women's empowerment and all of these things, which quite frankly, I believe are incredibly important and overdue. And yes, and we could make mistakes if we didn't. There are ways in which we could totally leave boys behind in this process on it if we're not giving them the proper attention.
Mhm.
It's not to raise women up. We don't need to put men and boys down.
Right.
To uh, to create environments in which girls and women can thrive do not need to be at the expense of what boys and men need.
Right.
There's a difference between what we are used to and what we need. What we, I believe that we need to bring attention into how to create environments that truly work for everyone, and not that in our desire to lift those up who have been held down too long, we instead end up neglecting or uh, making wrong, especially boys who are innocent in all of this.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Oh, one last thing: don't circumcise your infant boys.
Yes.
Speaking of bodily autonomy, so
Yes.
so
Yes. Thank you.
that's a whole can of worms in and of itself. But there's a new documentary that just came out last week, I believe, called American Circumcision.
Mm.
Uh, I just had uh, the director Brendan Murata on my podcast a week or so ago. I highly recommend the documentary, especially if you are planning on having any more children. um, but I believe it's a huge part of this change that's necessary.
Yeah. Well, thank you for mentioning that too, because I think it is an important issue. And, I mean, body autonomy, that's like the biggest violation you could have right as you arrive on the planet, you know?
Yeah, and I appreciate that you have that awareness, and I am aware that it is a highly controversial topic that a lot of people can have really strong emotions around. But oftentimes, they didn't even realize they had strong emotions around until something came up that challenged their underlying beliefs. And
Sure.
so, particularly if you're not already on board that train, or you have your questions around, well, I don't know about circumcision, or you think that it's great, um, check out the documentary.
Yeah, ask questions, you know. I mean, my
Yeah,
thing is, it's like don't believe everything that you hear, question it, do
totally.
your own research,
Yeah.
find out what works for you and whatever is right for you and your family, that's totally fine, But, I think it's good to at least question.
And so I'd like to leave you all with a free gift.
Yeah.
This is aimed towards the men in the audience, women, if you want to uh, um, get your men to sign up for this wonderful. I developed this evolved masculine blueprint that is basically a blueprint on help men really clarify, well, what does the evolved masculine mean? Well, first I lay out my vision of it, but then it also guides the listener. It's about 10-minute audio to get clear on what their vision of their own evolved masculine self would be like.
Mhm.
And that through that gain that clarity around what that is for you, it becomes easier for you to grow in that direction. It's actually quite a powerful piece. It's only 10 minutes. Check it out at evolvedmasculine.com/blueprint. Sorry, evolvedmasculine.com/blueprint. Also, feel free to drop me a message either through that website or find me on Facebook, Destin Gerek, DestinGerek. I'm sure she'll have it up there.
Yes, I
Um,
will.
and in within a month, I've been working with my team to launch a new online membership community for the Evolved Masculine at a low price point, so making it very easily accessible to anyone that's really built around this vision, around these teachings of the Evolved Masculine, a space to help men who are really committed to being the best man that they can be, to grow, to lean into their edge, and to have more of what they want in life, in all areas of their life, including sex and women, but all areas of their life.
Yes.
Reach out, and I'll send you the information as well. And thank
Great.
you, Robin, for bringing me on to be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you so much for participating. I've actually been wanting to talk to you for a long time, so I'm glad that it worked out and that you were able to participate. And I think this is a really important message for people, and for all the moms out there who want to raise, evolved young men. I think this is going to be a really great resource for them. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. It's on all of us to raise healthy men, and it starts with how we raise our children.
Yeah, and that was really one of the reasons why I wanted to My business is called Raising Empowered Daughters. And with this event, I wanted to include the boys because I really felt strongly that they need to be part of this conversation. It's
Yeah,
like
they
you
do.
said, we can't leave them behind. We can't do this alone. It's like we need our
It'll
men.
just create a new set of problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we all need to rise up together and, create the new vision of what we want our society to look like. So thank you so much for being part of that.
Thank you so much, Robin. Really a pleasure. Bye.
I want to thank you for joining us today. That conversation with Destin was just amazing. I think actually it was one of my favorites. So, yeah, what an amazing vision. I would wish that there was more men out there like him. So, thank you, Destin, for all of the work that you're doing. And I want to thank you for coming and being present here on this event. If you haven't gotten a chance to listen to my interview, definitely you'll want to catch that. This has just been such an incredible experience. Like every single one of these interviews has just been amazing and just full of incredible information that you can use and implement right away. I'm immensely grateful to all of these people who have come together to have these important conversations. So I want to thank all of our speakers. And I have a special announcement for you coming up on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific. We are going to be doing a live Q&A call. And some of our speakers are going to be joining us. You'll have the opportunity to ask us questions, share what you found most valuable, give us any feedback that you'd like to. And we look forward to interacting with you, getting an opportunity to meet some of you. So I hope that you'll join us on Sunday morning. And then also, I want to let you know that tonight is the last night to get the recordings for just $97. And when you upgrade, you'll have the opportunity to download the videos and also the audio files. Plus, you get all of the bonuses that our speakers have donated to the upgrade package. And there's some really cool ones in there. So definitely check that out. If you want the recordings, definitely pick them up tonight. And I hope you will join us on Sunday. I'm really looking forward to getting to meet you and answering some questions and interacting with you on our live Zoom call. So it'll be a video conference call. So very much looking forward to that. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to my interview, definitely, take a listen there because talking to your kids about sex is super important, especially in this day and age. So I look forward to sharing with you about that. So thanks again for listening. Bye-bye.